Good morning.
Somebody's got a bird.
Oh, yeah, sorry, is it too loud?
No,
No.
not at all.
As long as we know what it is, and it's little sounds from nowhere.
Exactly.
So we're not using one of the three files this time?
No, we're in the Harvey Fields,
Oh,
and
yeah, I don't have that.
Okay, it was sent back, oh gosh, back in September. So I'll see if I can email it to you. Donnie, what is your email address?
It's Newman Ryberg, NEWMANRYB as in boy, ERG, Newman Ryberg at Gmail.
New NEWMANRV.
Ryberg, RYB as in boy, ERG.
Okay, bird. Okay, let's see if I can get it to you. Hold on just a second.
Okay. My iPad won't stay up.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. No,
It's not going to be here. Okay. Give me a sec.
Oh, I just want to, okay.
Nope. Don't fall. Okay.
Give me a sec. There. Okay. I'm going to forward this to you. Let's hope it goes through. All lowercase?
Yes.
At Gmail?
Oh, I gotta get my phone in case I get a phone call.
Yep.
At Gmail?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if it goes through. Well, it looks like it went through. Did you get it?
Not yet. I'll just keep refreshing.
All right. I thought Marinia said she wasn't going to be here today.
Where's everybody?
Well, Thursday meeting,
They're getting ready for Halloween.
not attend the meeting tomorrow. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm not getting it.
Okay. Second.
Who has a bird chirping?
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll
I
mute,
think
I'll
the
mute
same
it.
thing.
Is Donnie,
Yeah.
is Donnie.
Or it's my bird
It
anyway.
did go through. Apparently I did not have the correct email.
Okay, so it's Newman with an N, like
Uh-huh.
Nancy.
Oh, capital N, okay.
Newman, Newman,
Uh-huh.
and then Ryberg, Ryberg.
Oh, B-E-R-G.
Yeah, Berg, like an iceberg.
I gotcha.
Okay,
You have the rest of it right? The ad part after the
I'm,
ad?
I'm working on it.
hang on, you. Where did I put my
I gotta get
earbuds?
find my blessings later.
You stay right there, puppy.
Rabbi, how are we gonna
Yes.
get our class assignments from
Okay.
now on, since Charlotte's not there?
Well, you should have the sheet that I prepared
Right.
that takes us through next April.
Oh, April? Okay.
Yep,
Let's see, it goes through,
I had the one I
yeah,
have,
April 10th.
I'm gonna have to get an update on that. I have the one I have is February
The
20.
dates are wrong, however, so maybe somebody could assist in editing this with me.
I can
And then
try.
Then we'll send it out again with the correct
Oh,
date.
so you're gonna send it out again, then I'll have it, okay. The one I have is only up to February, so I don't have the latest, I guess.
That's what I have. It's February. Yeah,
Ah.
it's not going through. Oh, well,
I have another email address. Would you want it?
okay.
It's my first name, Donnie,
Spell
and
it,
then my middle initial L,
Uh-huh.
spell
and
Donnie.
then Newman,
Say-
and then Newman.
Yeah.
Yeah, just Donnie L. Newman.
And it's all lowercase,
Yeah,
okay, and
Gmail.
email,
Yes.
okay. Try it again. This has got all four PDFs and one Excel.
Good morning, everyone. Are we ready to start?
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome to all. Let's do the opening blessing and then we can talk about a few little minor things quickly.
All
Are you
right.
ready for the opening blessing? Everybody's
Yes,
got
sir.
it. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam
haolam asher
asher
kidshanu
kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzvanu
v'tzivanu azot
לעשות בדברי Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the world,
who has
who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage in the words of Torah.
Amen.
Amen. We're meeting tomorrow for lunch, if anyone would like to join us. Liz is half with us today. I'm not sure if it's her left side or her right side, but she is part here and part elsewhere, mentally and physically. So we welcome part of Liz.
Thank you.
And you're all invited to tomorrow lunch if you are interested in helping to discuss, the future direction of Torah study and related issues. Marcia.
Please save me a seat. We are down to one car in this household for a few months. And so my son who I'm sharing with, had a dental emergency. He's got an appointment tomorrow. And as soon as he gets back from the dentist, I'm on my way. So please save me a seat,
Yes,
okay?
ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
and this is that Panera Bread in Surprise.
Yes.
It's close to some of you, further away from others. So if you live in East Glendale or somewhere in Avondale, then you're just gonna have to drive a little further. If you're in Alabama, you're gonna have to drive much further.
I
But
must
surely
start off a little while. About an
you're
hour, I'll start out.
you're
Oh my God.
invited. Just start driving really early.
There you go.
Yes.
Um, any quick comments about the last 2 weeks? So the last 2 weeks ago, we did Philo. Last week, we did a collection of new sources, rabbinic sources. And these were both interesting, but from a moderating point of view, I found it to be very difficult to moderate. And there was definitely people that liked it and people that didn't like it. So I'll take 2 or 3 very quick comments, and then we're gonna go to this week's Parsha. Okay, well,
No,
then
no questions,
no comments. We can go to
no
this week's
comments or
Parsha.
questions.
So, as you know, I request that you bring some sort of a Tanakh with you or a Torah with you. And this is the Jewish Publication Society, Tanakh, the Holy Scriptures. It's in English only, this particular volume, and it's small and it's easy to handle. JPS is just coming out with a gender sensitive version of this. So if you're interested in buying something, you might want to buy that. We are now doing Lech Lecha, which you can find on page 38 and 39. What qualified Abram for leadership of the Jewish people? And this brings up the general issue of leadership. So I qualified for leadership of this synagogue by going to Hebrew Union College, and I studied for 5 years to become a rabbi after I did a 4-year bachelor degree. And then once I graduated, I had to go back a few months later for the smicha ceremony. And the then president of Hebrew Union College placed his arms on me and he ordained me, as has been done for a long time. And they gave me a degree saying I was a rabbi in Israel. And then based on that, I can enter the union, the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And based on that, I can apply for jobs among Union for Reform Judaism congregations. But unofficially, there's a certain expectation that I have a certain knowledge, both of Judaism and how to run a congregation, which may or may not be true in reality, but there's a certain assumption that I come with certain skills and certain knowledge and certain demeanor and things like that. Any comments to start off with about the prerequisites for any sort of leadership? And then we'll get into why Abram may or may not have been a good candidate. Okay. Nothing. Can people hear me?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
with you.
We're just
Quiet
Our-
day today.
Our talkative members are not here. Okay, well then we can start reading on page 38. This is Perek Aleph, what qualified Abram for leadership of the Jewish people? As you're aware, Abram is Abraham's original name. God is going to change it later and add the hey. This is my bar mitzvah portion. So I gave many, many years ago a speech on this, which was not recorded. They didn't have Zoom or streaming then. So I can't play it for you. But
Well,
you just have to believe me that my relatives said I spoke very well. Evelyn,
I'm curious, when we hear Hebrew names, I usually hear them referred to as Avram, not Abraham or Avraham. What is the difference? Why would
Well,
they still call him Avram?
well, in Hebrew it'd be Avram, and then later Avraham, and in English the English is pronounced a little differently, so it'd be Avram and Avraham, or Abraham and Abram. So now, why God would add the hey, this is something that the commentators discuss. Biblical critics would have different explanation for why there's an Abram and an Abraham, but we won't get into that here. Sai must know what I'm talking about, so it'll be a secret between me and Sai. Marcia.
So what you were saying, because I couldn't understand, is it sometimes with a V as opposed to a B? Is it Avram or Avram?
Well, that's true, but the differences between Abram and Abraham is the addition of
Yeah.
a letter
Yeah,
hey
right.
or H. So
Right.
that's added. But the bet and the vet, it's the same letter, whether there's a dot in it or not. And so since in the Torah there's no dots, we have to, assume what would be best there. So you normally say Avraham, Avraham. So it would be
Avraham.
without the dot in the bet. So it'd be a v rather than a b.
Okay.
Okay, who'd like to read? Minya, would you consider opening us up?
Sure. Sure. What qualified Abram for leadership of the Jewish people? The Torah tells us very little about Abram's early life. We are informed that he and Sarah, along with his nephew Lot, were brought by his father Terah from Ur of the Chaldeans to Haran. After Terah's death, Abram was commanded by God to leave Haran and promised that he would become a great nation. For thousands of years, students of Torah have been asking, why was Abram chosen for such an important leadership? What had he done to be named the founder of the Jewish people? The rabbis who studied this Torah portion suggested that while the Torah may not tell us much about Abram's early life or why he may have been selected for leadership, there was much to learn from the legends collected and passed from generation to generation by Jews.
Okay, so stop there. So what is Harvey Fields telling us? How much information is there in the Torah about Abraham's early life?
Not much.
No,
Really? All right. But on the other hand, where do we have information from?
no, the Torah.
No.
But
What does it say there in the last paragraph that we just read?
Legends.
legends collected.
Right. Thank you. So legends collected in Hebrew would be midrash. So there's midrashim about Abraham's early life. So the rabbis didn't have anything in the Torah, so they made stuff up, that exemplified what they wanted to believe about Abraham's early life. Now, what do we know historically? Is there any historical evidence about Abraham? Marcia.
From last year, I remember, or the year before, who knows? Abraham's father sold idols. He had an idol shop, so to speak. So he's at that time, people had different statues, idols for different purposes, and he apparently had a collection of them that he sold.
And is this in the Torah?
I don't know. It must be midrash if
Right. Thank you. So it's not in the Torah, it's a midrash. So, but in a lot of the children's stories, midrash and Torah are interspersed. So I was raised on this story and other stories like it, completely unaware that it was not in the Torah. So they just mixed it all in. And I was never told it was in the Torah either. So, but it was considered a basic part of Abraham's biography. And the story was very colorful. Abraham is at his father Terach has this big idol store. Idols are us. And he's going to lunch with a business colleague. So he says to Abraham, watch the store while I'm gone. And when he comes back, Terach is shocked to see all the idols are smashed up, except for one big one that has a big, sledgehammer sitting in front of him and a bunch of food. And Terach says in shock, what happened? And Abram says, well, I wanted to feed them lunch. And the big one there took that big sledgehammer and he said, I'm not sharing any of the food with any of the other idols. And he smashed up all the other idols and he took the food for himself. And Terach says, what are you, crazy? Idols don't do any of that stuff. And then Abram says, does your ears not hear what your mouth says? In other words, this whole concept of idols is pointless. It's silly. They're not real. And Abraham got into big trouble for that. And his father then turned him into the governor, Nebuchadnezzar, who sentenced him to be burned alive in a furnace. And so they put Abraham in a furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar threw him in as punishment for desecrating the idols. And then he didn't burn up. He came out the other side fine. And so this is considered, a sign that God was with him. But none of this is in the Torah. It's all in the Midrash. And Harvey Fields doesn't use the word Midrash. He says, we learn all this from the legends collected and passed from generation to generation by Jews. That's his term for Midrash. Sai.
I was going to ask, who was this individual who consigned him to the fire, if you will?
He was the head of the king in Babylonia. Terach lived, they came from Babylonia, which is, I guess, today Iraq. And the king there was a very famous guy named Nebuchadnezzar. And he was the one, when he heard that Abraham had smashed up all the idols, this is a capital crime. It's attack against the religion of the state, of which Nebuchadnezzar was an influential part. I don't know exactly their beliefs, but they didn't have separation of church and state. So an attack against the idols is an attack against the king, and the king, the punishment for that was being burned alive. Okay. Comments? Oh, and we want to welcome Dawnie to our group today. So hello, Dawnie.
Hi.
And you'll see her at Friday night services as well. So nice to have you join us. And it was fun to have coffee with you at Starbucks. And
Yours
so
was
that's-
pink, not coffee.
oh, I had the dragon drink, right?
You did.
And thank you. Thank you for that dragon drink. I felt guilty, because dragons are endangered, but it was delicious.
I'm glad.
Any comments? If not, back to you, Minya.
According to some of those reports, Abram rebelled against the worship of idols in his home and in the palace of Nimrod, who ruled at that time. At an early age, he saw some people praying to different stars and planets, and others making gods out of wood and stone. He said to himself, how is it possible for this wonderful world to have been created by a star or a planet or by an idol that is made by human hands? How is it possible for something manufactured of wood or stone to be considered responsible for the development of our human ethical sense of right and wrong, or of our desire to improve the world? The more questions Abram asked, the more foolish idolatry seemed to him. So he began asking questions of his father and of others who worked in Nimrod's palace. They resented his questions because they could not answer them. They accused Abram of being a troublemaker and a revolutionary. When he persisted with his questions and public rejection of idolatry, his father reported him to Nimrod, and he was persecuted for his ideas and put into prison.
All right, what do you think?
A rotten father.
Does this qualify? So it implicitly is suggesting that to be a leader of a new group like the Jews, you have to be willing to go against the established order. You have to be a revolutionary. You have to be willing to risk everything to be a leader of a new group and hope that that group gets going. So there's a lot of people who do this, who, stake everything on a revolutionary attack against the existing order. And most of the times, their group never goes anywhere and they end up in prison or killed or just very frustrated, and that nothing happens. But every once in a while, somebody like Fidel Castro, he had a small group of revolutionary in the mountains out in eastern Cuba, and somehow he managed to overthrow the powerful Cuban government and to stay in power for many, 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 many decades. Even after his death, his regime is still in place. So did he know when Fidel Castro decided to leave his comfortable upper middle class or lower upper class parents and set out to the mountains to overthrow the government, that he would be so successful? He could have easily have gotten himself killed or ended up in prison for life. So it's a very, very high risk thing. But once in a while, from the revolutionaries' point of view, it works out. Most of the time, not. That poor guy Navalny, who's in Soviet prison, and they just sentenced him to another 10 years. He's likely to spend his entire life in prison and then die there, with Putin to still be president of Russia when he dies. He's probably not going to get anywhere. I mean, he did get a certain degree of fame, and he's generally seen as the most important opposition leader. But if nothing changes, has he really accomplished anything? So he'll be in the history books as the guy who would have been a more just president of Russia. But, is that worth spending your life in prison for? So, but yes, Minya.
It seems to me that a quality that a leader has to have is the one that is willing to ask questions and stand out apart from the rest of the group. And asking those questions is what gets them into trouble. If they don't say anything and just stay as part of the pack, then they don't have to worry about it. But if you're really willing to ask questions that other people are afraid to ask, I think that puts you one step ahead of the rest of the gang.
Very good point, Sai.
I wonder how meaningful the change in believing in something else other than the idols made a difference in their lives.
Well, that's a good question. So, does believing in an idol rather than God make an actual difference in our lives? I mean, a lot of people today, are telling me, we want to believe in God, or we're quite happy with Judaism, but God is supposed to make everything better, and everything is getting worse, for us personally and for the world. And so we feel a little disappointed in God. We didn't have that high expectations to begin with, because we knew from a young age that bad things happen, but we're still disappointed.
Why do people expect God to look after them with great benevolence and help them, each individual? I mean, Why do people feel that they are deserving of that? What is there in our makeup that we want Big Father to look out for us and help us and aid us? And is this an infantile reaction, or is this someone who I find it difficult to expect God to look after me personally and help me and look out for me. It's unrealistic. It's a personal God, and I don't believe in that kind of a God.
Okay, Cy?
Oh, well, the whole theory is that if you believe in the God will take care of you. That's what our religion is all about.
Right. And that doesn't seem to work out in practice that well. And so, I mean, somebody wrote me a few days ago and they said, "Oh, I asked my neighbor lives right next to me and he's Jewish." So I said, would he allow me to take him to synagogue one week? Just to should, just for him to come once. And the neighbor said, no, he is never going to step foot in a synagogue ever again. He was raised Orthodox. And when he was a young adult, his wife and child died in separate, terrible situations. And he wants nothing to do with a synagogue or with anything to do with Judaism ever again. So, it's, who am I to judge anybody else? I like Judaism. I like God. I'm connected to these things, whether good things happen or bad things happen. My connection to Judaism is not based on having had good things happen to me. Although people tell me that I haven't had too much bad happen, so I'm quite lucky, or quite, that maybe God's watching out for me. Maybe I just have luck, whatever it is. But if bad things happen, if I was in terrible, terrible situation, I don't see how that would benefit me to then cut all connections with God and with Judaism and with the synagogue. How's that going to make my situation better? But I don't expect God to do good things for me, or not to protect me from harm. That's just part of the world, right? Bad things happen for all sorts of different reasons. I may not like that, but but people feel differently. Other comments, Steve?
Well, because of all your righteousness and all your things that you do in acts of kindness, God definitely does favor you, I would think, and you should be proud of that.
I'm worried though that someday it may all come to an end, and then
You have no control over that, though. You have no
right,
control.
right. So because it's a cumulative thing, so it might have been better to have more little problems earlier than one big problem later. But we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and that frightens us. It frightens us terribly, right? So we're all fearful of the future, both our personal futures and the collective futures. And just a few weeks ago we saw mass savagery on a scale not seen since the Holocaust, just coming seemingly out of nowhere. Just totally, a normal Saturday morning, and then these barbarians come and just slaughter people and torture people, and just like in the Holocaust. But like 80 years later, it's just unbelievable. So there's always the fear that something could happen, very sudden. Um, okay, let's take a look at the box, because I think that, this is the story that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Minya, you're still up to it?
Yeah, yes, I am. I was gonna ask you if you wrote your story down. The
My
one you
story.
just told, this one you just told us about. Did you write it down so you will have it?
Which story?
The one you just told us.
It's been
Wait,
recorded.
Oh, it's been
It's
recorded.
definitely being recorded, so.
Yes.
what are you referring to? The story about the guy whose friend
No,
wouldn't
your
come?
life.
Yeah, I'll remember that, you know.
Okay, but everyone's right. It's recorded. We don't have to write it down.
Yeah, there's so many recordings, it'll be hard to find later, but it's there.
Yeah,
It's there.
it will be there.
Abram's rejection of idolatry. When Abram came to his father's home, he saw his father's gods, 12 in number. He hurried from the room into his father's outer courtyard, where he found his father seated with all his servants. And he came and sat down before his father and asked him, "Father, tell me, where is the God who created the heavens and the earth and created all human beings on earth?" And Terah answered Abram his son, saying, "Why, those who created all of these are with us in the house." So Abram took dishes and brought them into the chamber before his father's gods, and saw that not one of them was stretching out a hand to eat. So he took hammers and smashed all the gods of his father. When Terah saw this, he grew very angry. "What have you done to all my gods?" And Abram answered his father, "I only brought fine dishes of food before them, but when I offered the dishes to them to eat, all of them put out their hands to begin before the biggest of them had started eating. When the big one saw what they did without waiting for him, he grew very angry and smashed them all." When Terah heard this, he grew exceedingly angry. "You are speaking falsehood to me. Have these gods any spirit or soul or strength to do all you have told me? Why, they are wood and stone, and I made them. How can you tell me such lies?" Then Abram answered his father, "Then how can you worship these idols who do not have strength to do anything? Are these idols in whom you trust going to deliver you? Can they really hear your prayers when you cry unto them?"
Uh-huh. So this is a slight variation of the story I told about 10 minutes ago. So I wanted to read it because it is a little bit different. What do you think of the story, Marcia?
Well, again, the kid smashed up the inventory, so basically. So I can imagine his father kind of lost it at that point. But I am sure that his father knew that those gods were not capable of controlling anything. They were just clay or whatever they were made out of, bronze or whatever they made them out of. And it was more of a superstitious situation that they were all using these gods, these idol statuettes, basically. And but I can't. It's so hard to believe the story, because what kind of a father? Because the son ran amok with the hammer and the bull in the china shop, basically. Would turn his father into the king to be imprisoned. It's just craziness. I'm sorry. It doesn't even make sense.
That's not in the story here, though. That's in my version, but in their version, there's nothing about the father turning him in, is there?
Oh,
No,
No,
no. I think the father is simply
the story didn't go that
apprehensive.
far here.
He's apprehensive about going against the establishment, and the establishment says that these are the idols you will worship. And while many people may not have believed it, none of them were strong enough to rebel the way Abraham is trying to rebel. And none of them are questioning, or even if they do question, they feel that they can't break the rules per se. And this is, I think, true even later on in Christianity, I think Christianity took a great hold in the Roman Empire very rapidly, because there must have been many who did not believe in the idols that the emperor dictated that they were to worship. And I think there's always an element that wants something greater than that which is concrete. They want to think of something that is all encompassing, and a little idol of wood or stone doesn't fit the bill, so to speak. And I think this is how the religion of Judaism began. This was the nucleus of it with Abram, that people were looking for something more than the idols per se, to give them a greater meaning and understanding of what the world was about them. Anybody disagree?
Nope.
Shirley,
No, I
Dawn?
kind
Shirley,
I haven't had time to process it, but I kind of like what you said. I feel very similar.
okay. Anybody disagree?
I
Okay.
did, excuse me, I guess I have to raise my hand. Didn't they basically consider the idols as representation, the object as representations of a god? Is that not true? Or I mean, how many little kitchen gods could you have? They're all showing the same god, all lined up, let's say, in the store. And they're just representations of the kitchen god, or the corn god that the Indians use, or this or that. So,
And this
Yeah.
is a superfluous question. What did the Mesopotamians believe about their idols? Did they believe that they really embodied, gods, or were they symbolic? And I don't know the answer to that exactly.
Well,
Side, you
my
wanna?
I would have thought if they had any sense, it would have been symbolic.
My feeling was that all of these idols represented a piece of nature that they couldn't understand, namely the sun, the moon, the ocean. There was nothing more than that in terms of being esoteric or going beyond a deep depth. They had to have an explanation what the sun was. They needed an explanation for what the moon was. And these idols represented them. And there were hundreds of societies at that particular point in time that had their different kinds of idols to represent the moons and the sun.
Okay, Marcia.
And I have in my bedroom a little wall hanging that I got up in somewhere in northern Arizona, and it shows the corn gods. It's basically what Isaiah is saying. Every society that ever is, everybody, I guess, is looking for some sort of deeper meaning, and they wind up with these individual gods of this, or the other thing. The Greeks had it in a grander sense, if you will, and the American Indians worshipped Mother Nature, Earth, but then differentiated with minor gods that all, I guess, contributed to Mother Earth's power, etc. So I think people are looking for something more. Why is the things happening? And so they wind up attributing it to some force that they call a god.
Evelyn?
No, I was just saying, yes, in the beginning, I think they attributed the god Poseidon, the god of the oceans, and the god of the mountains, and yes, and everything else. But I think people felt that this was psychologically, emotionally incomplete. There had to be something more than the specific gods. And I think this is the beginning of people feeling that there was something greater than these individual aspects of what they saw on Earth. And I'm saying essentially the same thing that Marcia did. I'm simply reiterating it in a slightly different way. But basically, it is the search for something greater than just these little individual things. And as man began to understand more about the world about him, I think again the concept of something far, far greater than we on earth or the animals around us. They began to realize that there had to be some creator that created what we are, and it was more than just an idol or one individual aspect of what they attributed it to. So it's as I said, I'm simply reiterating what Marcia has said before.
So to be a revolutionary leader, you have to burn down what came before you. So Fidel Castro took away his own family's plantation in eastern Cuba. He had his new government confiscate it and many other people's plantations. You know, Abraham, according to the story, smashed up all his father's idols. The story could have been that he went to the town center and smashed the idol sitting in the middle of the town square, but it's not. It has to be his own father's property. So you have to turn against your family and destroy their property, which represent the old order. And you can't be seen as building your revolutionary career by coasting with your family's already established achievements. You have to break away, reject your family in a large sense, and start afresh and build your own legacy. So I mean, it's very hard. If your father's a famous rabbi and you become a rabbi, very, very hard, right? Because how do you build a persona as a leader when you're following in the footsteps of somebody with your same name who is so famous and so charismatic and so wonderful? It's extremely difficult. So if your father was a rabbi, you become a communist. Or if your father was a communist, you become a rabbi. But you have to break radically and perhaps even violently with your personal history as well as with the history of your society if you want to be a revolutionary leader. If you just want to get a job, then you can get a job and you fit into the existing hierarchy and you try to go up that hierarchy. But it's much more satisfying in a certain way to burn it all down and start afresh. But it's very high risk. You can end up dead very easily. Evelyn.
I'm thinking when you mentioned Fidel Castro, if Batista's government had not been so corrupt, and if the masses had not been in such dire straits, Fidel Castro might not have been quite as successful, but the whole society was in such distress with a few elite who were living off the rest of the masses. The same thing was true with the French Revolution, where you had the king and the nobles who were milking them dry, and the masses were suffering to the degree where the human being says, I cannot tolerate this anymore. And if a leader shows up and says, I will help you, I will change you, then you get this revolution per se. And it's always when things have gotten, the pendulum has swung to one particular group, and a elitist group that is taking advantage of the others to the degree where the general masses are suffering very badly. The American Revolution, when the king said, I'm going to tax you until you can't stand it anymore, they said, that's it, we can't take it anymore, and they rebelled. I mean, there is
But the American Revolution, there was no one revolutionary leader who burned his own family stuff. It was more of a collective.
It was a collective revolution. Yeah.
Right. So it was different in that way. But if you think about Lenin or Marx or Lenin, for example, and if you think about the French revolutionaries and so forth and so on, you can see more the model. But here, Abraham is determined to affect, according to the understanding of the rabbis, right? So you have what's in the Bible about him, you have what's in the Talmud about him. These two documents are 1,000 years apart. So they're two separate Abrahams, and there's other Abrahams, right? How we see Abraham depends on who we are and what sources we're using and how much we can add to those sources. Now, if the rabbis can add these midrashim, can't we add our own stories about Abraham and say this is what we imagine Abraham did or would have done in such a situation? And therefore, we can create our own Abraham. But he was brave and he was willing to make a radical departure from the past. But even then, at some point, he has to take his wife and his flocks and his followers, and he leaves his homeland, right? And in the beginning of this parsha, as I see in the Torah, at the very beginning, chapter 12, verse 1, which is the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha, it says, God said to Abram, go forth from your native land, Lech Lecha ma'artzecha, and from your father's house, Umibeit Avicha, to the land that I will show you, El Eretz Asher Echa. So,
What is the portion? Where are you in the Torah?
Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. And that's the beginning of the Parshat Lech Lecha.
Mhm.
And so it starts out, it doesn't
Right.
start out with Abraham destroying idols, which is not in the Torah anywhere.
Right.
It starts out with God saying to Abram, go. And he repeats it. It seems to be repetitive. Go from your native land, go from your father's house. Well, if you're leaving your father's, if you're leaving the United States and you're going to Vietnam, you're obviously going to leave your father's house, right? Unless your father has a summer house in Vietnam. So it's not necessary. This is rhetoric. It's language used in the Torah deliberately to emphasize the extremity of the situation. God is saying to Abraham, leave everything you know and go. So he's a radical. He's willing to chop things down. He's willing to change things, but he can't really do this in his native land. He has to move halfway around the world, at that time anyway. But to go from Iraq to Israel is quite a trip. They didn't have planes, obviously, and they didn't even have cars. So when traveling by camel, it's a schlep. Comments? Donnie, Liz, Shirley, Steve, Cy.
I think it's very, very difficult to change a concept from an idol to the thought of a single God. I don't think that's done overnight. And that's got to take a lot of thinking and pursuing and examining before you come to a conclusion like that. And so the Bible or the Mishnah that we're reading makes it easy. He thought about it, and the next day he had a new God. And that's not the way it works.
Yes, and that's very true. So in the Torah, it makes it seem so easy. In the Midrash, Abraham is thinking, and maybe he thinks for a few weeks, a few months, and he says, these idols can't be God. God has to be one over all the world and much more unified than all these bunch of, some of the idols are made of stone, some of wood, some of whatever, some are big, some are small. That's ridiculous. But it's all a matter of symbolic world, how you define symbolism and what are the metaphors you want to use. Marcia.
So I can't imagine that he had compatriots that he was discussing this with. I'm not sure about that, which is what I think Cy might be implying that it had to be collective reasoning of people getting together and thinking this whole thing out. But I guess many people, if you just look at the way the world works, if you look at the stars, if you look at plants, if you look at animals and people, and everything seems to work perfectly and integrates, and life is so perfectly formed that something had to have thought this out. Something had to happen. Even they didn't know from evolution, but somehow or other this all had to have a beginning and a creationism, right? So go ahead, Cy. I'm gonna let
No,
you.
no, go ahead, Marcia, finish.
Well, so I would imagine, though, if he thought about this, and a lot of it has to do, and excuse me for saying it, with having a big mouth. Because I have noticed that people who make a difference are people who are able to express themselves, who will be able to convince other people of their beliefs, whether they're right or wrong, they're still good convincers. And that makes a big difference in whether you have a following in the world with other people. So,
The great communicator.
great.
And it-
Hi, I'm in Torah study. Is it
When you
something?
think of any political change, it doesn't
I'll
happen
call you as
with
soon as
one or
Torah study.
two men. It's a long process. There's a lot of discussion. A lot of people get
I'll call you as soon
involved
as I can.
before the change occurs. Whether
Okay.
it be our revolution or any revolution.
Right.
And so I think, in my mind, the same thing has to happen with the concept of convincing and talking to people about a new God.
We're still tossing that around
That's
because,
right.
right? Is there a God? How did life begin? The Big Bang Theory. Well, what started the Big Bang? Something had to have started then. What happened before the
right.
Big Bang? And they're still following all this kind of stuff up. So it may have started with an Abraham type person or neighborhood that was talking about it, but it's still being considered,
Minya?
I think there's more to it in terms of Abram heard the Lord speaking to him. If he didn't have such a powerful presence appear in his life, would he really have left and just gone on his own with whoever followed him and started a life somewhere else? I think having this greater being address him, especially it starts just that way in the reading. The Lord said to Abram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. Well, if he didn't have that voice that he heard telling him this, wouldn't he maybe have just stayed where he was, even though he turns out to be a great leader, but he still needed the impetus to leave. And if he didn't hear this voice, maybe he wouldn't have left. I just think that there's some kind of a push behind things that makes you get started to go and do something.
Marcia?
So the Torah is saying the Lord said to Abraham, but or in all these cases, is it the Lord saying to this person or that person, or is it the person saying, I have to leave this area if I'm going to make a difference. I have to start a new life and do it in a new place. And maybe that's how I have to, I don't know. I mean, do you believe implicitly the word as it is written on the page? It's a tough decision,
I think you want to look at it literally and metaphorically at the same time.
Yeah. How
Um,
many times have we heard people say that something made them make this radical change? You could say it was God. You could say it was intrinsically something within that individual that made them take that leap, that jump to do something that was radically different from what was expected. And who's to say it wasn't God, but who is to say it wasn't the individual himself and his thought processes that made him do it? And so you're looking at it realistically and metaphorically.
Go
Yeah,
west,
so
young man. You know?
now if you look at the same chapter 12, verse 5, it says Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot. Lot's wife eventually becomes Salt, right? She turns around at the wrong time. And all the wealth that they had amassed and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. So remember, they started in a city called Ur Kasdim, which is in Iraq, and then they're going southwest, and then they stop in another city called Haran, and they're there for quite a while. It doesn't say how long, but they acquire wealth there. So they must have started a business. So they must have been there at least for 5 or 10 years. And then God says, go to Canaan. And they go to Canaan. So this stopover in Haran, I think, is also very critical to understanding the revolutionary personality. So we're not talking about somebody who leaves Ur Kasdim and goes straight to Israel. He has to stop somewhere. He has to prove himself in an independent location. Now, it's not a direct parallel, but you might want to look at the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? In the Odyssey, you have Odysseus, who was trying to get home from the battles in Troy. And this is a long process with many challenges. So here you have at least one stopover and one challenge. You have to prove yourself somehow. And only then can you continue on. He also takes not only his wealth, but the people that he had acquired. So he's apparently proselytizing. He and Sarai went door to door, knocking on doors and say, we have a new religion. We have one God. We'd like you to come and join us on Friday night. And most of the time, the people would slam their doors in their face and say, I'm not interested in hearing this. No solicitors. Go away or we'll shoot you. But apparently he was able to recruit some people. Now, it doesn't say he recruits them. Maybe they just were compelled to join him because of his magnetic personality. We don't know. Comments?
If I think
Yes, Marcia.
if I think about it, while you were talking, I was thinking about it. A lot of people who we know, even now as leaders, it did similar things. And before they became famous, before they became real big time leaders, if you will. And I'm not saying this because of the politics of it, but I know, like in Obama's case, just taking it as a thing, before he was president, he was in New York and he was living there, and I'm still a New Yorker, so I say here, living there, and he said, I think I should go to I'm going to go to Chicago. I understand they're looking for leaders there, and that's when he went and did that community service in Chicago. He took himself out of his element. He moved to a new place and he built a life there before he got recognized to get into politics in that situation in Chicago. He wasn't a Chicagoan. And other leaders, it was similar, unless they had money. When you have a Roosevelt or something like that, and you've got a head start on the whole thing, but a lot of people start that way. They take themselves into this new situation, and this is what Abraham did. He took himself into a new situation, and he was learning as he goes, if you will. He learns how to deal with people as he goes, probably, to make that little cadre that would fuck his followers. Would you not think, that?
He was a 30-year overnight success.
Yeah. It's not a get up and, here I am kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
If if you have money, people think, oh, you're so great because look at all the money this person has. And so they
Well,
often follow that person because.
And it very explicitly says that Abraham became wealthy, right? It
Yeah.
says he took all his wealth with him. So that's an interesting thing because the Bible's not trying to pretend that this was some ordinary lower middle class guy. This is a guy who was able to subsidize himself. Maybe, he didn't have to charge dues. His synagogue was free because he was paying for everything. So he could rent a nice building and provide and buy a great oneg from a caterer. He
Good
had
sound
chompies.
system.
He had a chompies catered every Friday night, and he had the best sound system. Yes, he didn't have our sound system where everything keeps breaking constantly, or sounding muffled or whatever. So he had, that certainly gives him but you have to have some sort of compelling idea. But my argument in some of the books I've written is that to build a new religious movement of this sort, you have to be countercultural, meaning you have to be against what is the norm in the culture. If you're just like, if you're accepting all the premises of the culture, they don't need you. So you have to be against at least some of the things that the culture stands for, but not to be so extreme that you just sound completely wacko. So there's a certain middle road where you're against some of the things that the average person, the society seems to accept, but not too much. You require sacrifice, but not too much. You require differentiation and separation, but not too much. So there's a middle road there where it's your medium intensity, but not to the degree where you have to give up everything. But if you are an extremist movement and you say you have to give up everything, you'll attract a very small group, but that's it. And that's why, I mean, online now, people can join groups of their choice, extreme or not, but the sacrifices they have to make are very limited. They don't have to tell anyone they're in this group. They can just go online and whatever it is, a neo-Nazi group or anything, they can be part of it and post all the time, but they don't have to give up their jobs and don't have to tell their families and don't have to leave their homes and don't have to do anything. They just have this secret life, which can be extreme. So then it's not as extreme as it would normally be. So that sort of changes the equation. But in Abraham's day, if you wanted to follow him as a monotheist, then you had to make sacrifices. You had to leave your family and your home and your country. And I don't know about languages. We can ask Sai, but I don't know if they spoke the same language in Ur Kasdim as they did in Haran as they did in Israel. I guess there was, I don't know. This is before Aramaic became popular in that area, I would think. So the Israelites spoke Hebrew. The other tribes spoke other languages. So Abraham did not speak Hebrew. That's another issue. Comments. Leaving your home. Breaking with your past. Did anyone here do anything like that where you aggressively rejected the ethos of your family and community and left? Yes, Steve.
Sorry. Yeah, I left the family business because my brother and my father and I did not agree on how to run things. And I left everything, my family, my job, all my friends,
Wow.
and moved from one community to another. And I reestablished myself and created an environment for me to, grow as an individual. And it took a lot of effort and strength So, but I did it and I feel much, much better because of it.
Wow. So did your father try to do anything to soften it and to
Nope,
prevent?
nope, nope. My father was a very stubborn man.
So he was like my way or the highway.
Exactly.
And I'm the father, you're the son, so you have to follow me.
Absolutely. And I was the youngest brother as well. So I had two strikes against me.
And did your mother try to mediate
She
things?
was she was a little discouraged because I was moving but I was moving to a place where I did have family. So that was kind of a win for her and knew that I was going to be taken care of. So
Interesting.
yep.
Marcia?
When I got married, my husband and I left New York. Now you think big deal, but at that point, and this is, I'm talking 1960, you did not leave the area where your family was. You stayed.
Yeah, yeah.
Evelyn can relate.
Yes, yeah, because I lived in New York City, and after we got married, we moved to Connecticut. And my mother said, "You're moving to the wilderness."
At the end of the world,
Yeah,
I moved to
yeah,
Connecticut,
and
Massachusetts.
the wild animals are there, and it was a difficult concept for her to accept that we were moving out of the city, not easily gotten to by train or bus or anything. And so, yeah, families were not happy when
Yeah, when we
this
moved
was
there.
immediately after the war and housing was in short supply, and young families were moving away from the metropolitan areas and moving to Levittown in Long Island or wherever, because this is where they could raise their families. And it's like when the Europeans left Europe and my parents left Russia to come here, there was nothing there for them. They had looked forward to a better future. We moved from the city to Connecticut because there was a better future. And I think this is what happens with young people. They don't want to stay where their parents are. They feel it is stagnant, and they have new ideas, and they want to explore those ideas elsewhere where they have the freedom to do it. I think this is typical of youth, and something that the older parents and older generation has to accept. This has always been true, going back all throughout human history. And so it's nothing new. It really isn't.
So you think maybe Abraham moving to the Negev eventually, from what it says in the book, was a typical young man getting willing to move and explore new
And
opportunities?
explore new options where
Well, he seems a little like Steve in that he couldn't get along in his father's business.
Right.
His father was rigid, and so there was like a conflict, and he left, leaving his father with his business, and went out on his own.
Makes it
Steve.
more relatable for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep in
Steve.
mind too, though, he did get the word from God. So he got some encouragement or something in his head
Head,
to
right.
say, this is what I have to do, not just for me, but for the world.
Right.
Yeah, he saw it, in his case, it was in a higher scale, if you will, than
Than
just
personal.
doing it on a
Right.
basis, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so Abraham is not just doing this for himself, although there's clearly his own personal situation, which is quite detailed in the Midrash, but it's also he's the founder of a new religion,
Mhm.
and that he's willing to sacrifice as much as necessary to try to spread the truth as he sees it, or to spread wisdom as he sees it. He feels that he's not only in a society that has deeply problematic beliefs, but that their whole ethical system is skewed because of those beliefs. And you could see modern examples of that as well. Communism, fascism, the you know, all sorts of things that are even closer to home. All right, Minya, do you wanna read very bottom of page 38, the last two lines, and then on to 39?
God chose Abram as the founder of the Jewish people because of his wisdom and bravery. He was not afraid to ask hard questions or to stand up for what he believed. He was willing to risk ridicule, even suffering and persecution for his convictions. He was willing to lead the minority of those who believed that idolatry was wrong and to devote his life to teaching that one God was the creative source of all life. Those qualities made him a gifted leader. Abram possessed other special qualities as well. The rabbis of the Midrash tell us that the prices he quoted in his business dealings were always fair, that people came to him for advice in times of trouble, and that when he was told that someone was sick, he would not just offer a prayer, but would visit and make the person feel better because of his concern and interest.
Skip the box and finish the essay, and then we'll go
Abram
back.
valued creative work. He rejected the company of those who chose to waste their energies and time with drugs or drunkenness. He respected those who planned for the future and who were willing to work hard in order to transform their ideas and hopes into reality. For all those reasons, our Torah interpreters tell us Abram was selected as the founder and leader of the Jewish people.
Okay, and then read the box.
Which one?
Abram's priorities.
Rabbi Levi explains that when Abram was traveling through various lands, he saw people going to drunken parties. May I not be a part of this country, he would say. But when he reached the location of Tyre near the land of Israel and saw people working at weeding and hoeing in the proper seasons, he said, may my portion be in this country.
You notice how Harvey emphasizes avoid drugs and drinking. He's writing here for a teenage audience or a preteen audience. So he's trying to put in a little bit of sobriety, influence. Be like Abraham and don't be like your drunken friends. And well, you know that a lot of kids, they can be very good, and when they hit adolescence, they go off the rails. And sometimes it's just a phase, and sometimes it never stops. I mean, I have at least one friend whose children, when they hit adolescence, they became, kind of druggies, and they stayed druggies, so now they're older and they're still druggies. So I mean, he's, I'm sure, not happy, but there's nothing he can do about it. So there's nothing to say or do. So Abraham, who's still called Abram, it's interesting that Harvey tries to explain some of the qualities that Abram had, that he had good character traits, maybe we could say, that he had sincerity and perseverance and bravery and courage and honesty and integrity, and so forth. And that he valued creative work. That's interesting that you don't necessarily think of Abraham as being creative. His job is to follow God's orders, right? That's not very creative. But yet Harvey emphasizes that Abram valued creative work. Sai and then Marcia.
I have to think that his father made a living, but what did his son do? The son, the thinker. How did he make a living?
He made a lot of money in Haran. It doesn't say how, but he figured out a way to make there were a lot of business opportunities in Haran in those days. And
what was he doing? You don't sell God.
well, he may have been a real estate developer. I don't know. Marcia.
I don't understand that last paragraph. He's making it up out of whole cloth. How does he know? You know?
Yeah, well, he did make that up. Which the paragraph about valuing creative works
Yeah, that whole
and
paragraph.
avoiding people who are using drugs.
Yeah, that and those who plan for the future and willing to work hard. Come on.
Yeah. But
How do we know
this
this?
is what we do. We have to build a full character profile for our founder. What do we want in
I'm
our
sure
founder?
it's probably
If you were told in a midrash that the person who founded Judaism was a little bit of a druggie and that he used marijuana on the weekends, I mean, what would be the purpose of that, of saying that?
Well, yeah, you have to build an extensive profile of the individual. And if you have to, you fabricate personality traits that reflect favorably upon this individual until you build them up to not necessarily God status, but
Like
someone who is noble and someone worthy of emulating, shall we say. And so this is the picture they're trying to build up of Abraham.
Well, and I think a leader to be able to lead people has to be seen by the followers in not idealizing the person, but you have to believe they're sincere, right? They're sincere and that they're trustworthy. Certain things are quite important. If if you think your leader is lying to you all the time and is stealing money, it's going to be very hard. And that's part of the problem in Israel now with Netanyahu, is that when he started out, he seemed very, idealistic and determined. When he was, has been prime minister 5 times over 20 years or something. And now people seem as self-interested and corrupt and incompetent. And incompetent because he's concerned only with himself. So he's got so many bad perceptions out there. It makes it very hard to be a leader, and for those in America who support either Biden or Trump, they believe that their chosen leader represents good values and they trust that person. And so I think you have to have, now that doesn't mean you think your leader is perfect, but on the whole, you have to believe that they're sincere and that they want what's best and they're going to work hard for the public welfare, however that's determined. And if not, if you have all these bad traits associated with them, then normally you need a new leader. Now, sometimes one thing is so disqualifying that it's the end, right? So they can be a good leader for many years, and then they're caught stealing millions of dollars from the public, um, and so even though everything else was good, that one thing is such a breach of confidence that you can't have them as a leader anymore. So Abraham is fulfilling God's mission and is beginning a certain process, and they're going to make a covenant. God is going to say to Abraham, you have a new name, and we're going to make a deal here. You're going to help me, and I'm going to help you, and this is going to continue throughout the generations. It's not just with you, it'll be with your son and your grandson and onward. This is a long-term commitment, a really long-term commitment. So that's something that is, so God also has to convey positive attributes here. If God doesn't say to Abraham, I'm the guy that promised to Adam and Eve to make a great world, and then I drowned everyone in the flood. If God were to say that, Abram would say, well, you don't sound like a very trustworthy God. So God has to say, I'm God, I'm stable, I'm all powerful, all knowing, and all the time there in a steady, secure presence. Marcia.
Evelyn was with me. We took a course away back from OSHER, the adult learning. And it was called, I think, something like Common Ground, Uncommon Ground. The Muslim faith believes in Abraham as their father of their nation too.
Mhm.
You know historically how both of those religions started. I mean, I know about what I forgot his name right now.
Hagar.
Yes.
Hagar's son, but what was
Ishmael.
Hagar's son name?
Ishmael.
Ishmael.
Ishmael, yeah.
Yeah, so is that where it all starts at that point? Yeah.
Yeah, so they traced their ancestry back from Ishmael to Abraham.
What do they
So
say about Abraham? Do they
They
similar?
see him as the father of Islam
Yeah,
because he's the father of Ishmael.
but
Now, of course, in the Bible, Ishmael was the son of the concubine,
Right.
and
Yes.
Sarah, once she has Isaac, demands that Hagar and Ishmael be thrust out into the desert,
right.
which was not nice. So even then, you can see a lot of the same tensions you see today, ironically or
Right.
sadly. That the Bible kind of predicts almost exactly what's going to happen to this very day.
Right, you think about that, yeah, right.
And I wish I could say that would be a nice thing, but it seems extremely, extremely sad.
Yeah. If we knew that, if they knew then what we know now, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe
that-
they did.
But no, maybe they wouldn't have, Sarah would not have gotten her way about casting them out,
any final comments, Donnie? Have you been able to follow today? You have to
You have
unmute.
to unmute.
Yeah,
There
I've
you
done
go.
you. Yeah. I don't think I got the right files.
Okay.
So
Oh, why
I
didn't you tell
tried.
me it was pages, you don't
Yeah, but
have
she
full
she doesn't have the
Genesis?
book. She doesn't have the book.
Oh, okay. You're going to send that to her. So what we
Yeah.
have is 3 books that cover the 5 books of the Torah, and each one is in a separate PDF. And so hopefully or you can also buy the hard copy, but the
Right.
PDF is available, and you can either print it off on your printer, or you can have 2 screens, one which you put up the PDF and one that you use the Zoom. Or you can divide the screen as well. And
Steve
so
sent me
Steve
some
will hopefully,
files.
Yeah, unfortunately, the one I sent you was from about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I wanted you to get the schedule for the following weeks. And then I'll see if I can find the PDFs that were sent a year ago. And I think because we're pretty much on the same topics as we did last year.
But Donnie, the books are available on Amazon,
Amazon.
or what is it called? Is it abe.com?
but we sent out,
Yeah, but
the full
if someone,
PDF. So if you're comfortable using them on your computer, you don't need to buy them.
no, you don't, but
Right.
if you want to get the books, they're like $6-7 a piece.
Right.
Okay.
And you buy them used.
Used, yeah, and then used ones are like new, so.
Exactly, because the kids only used one portion. This was designed for B'nai Mitzvah kids.
Yeah, and then their
This
parents.
volume, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of in an elementary aspect.
So that's
Okay.
it totally
Um,
$21 for 3 of them, I think, that I
Yeah.
spent with shipping.
Not too bad. And you can use it for reference later if you want.
Or you can use the PDF.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm comfortable with PDFs.
okay.
I'm good with that.
I'll see what I can do.
So tomorrow lunch, for anyone who's interested, we conclude with the blessing after the Torah study. We join together.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam
Hashem
asher natan lanu
Nanu Torah
Torah emet
Baruch
Notain HaTorah.
Blessed is
Blessed is
Adonai our God,
Adonai,
Our
Adonai,
God,
our God,
ruler of
ruler
the
of
ruler of the
universe,
universe, has given us a
giving us
teaching of
us
truth,
teaching of truth,
implanted
and
within us
with us
eternal life.
eternal life.
Blessed is
Blessed
God.
is Adonai,
Adonai,
ruler of the
doer
Torah.
of the Torah.
Amen.
Okay, I think next week we are on page 46 and 48. Vira.
Yes, Vayera is next week, and that is the hospitality of Abraham,
Abraham and Lot.
right, which is
Did
page
Olive, the
36.
hospitality, Olive.
Yeah,
Okay.
Olive. And Donnie, I'll see what I can do to send you the PDFs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now that I have the correct email.
Yes.
My apologies for that. I tried and tried and tried, but it didn't work. Anyway, look forward to seeing everyone at lunch tomorrow if they're available. And have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
you too.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Take
all
care.
part of
Bye.
Bye-bye all.
Bye.
Don't forget to save me a seat.
Won't do it. We'll
I
do
think David's got a 9:30 appointment at the dentist, so I've got to wait till he comes back from
Okay.
his crown came out, so
Oh, yeah.
get it taken care of.
Ouch.
And our lunch is at 11:30.
11:30.
30.
Yeah.
I'll come as soon as I can. I'm like,
Whenever you get there.
yeah, okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone. Take care.